Hey everybody, this is Allison from Thriving While Disabled, and today I'm going to talk to you guys a bit about the idea of emotional echoes. And what I mean by that is when present events cause a really strong reaction, much stronger than you would think they should cause. And very often the reason that happens is because it touches on another deeper seated memory, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. And so the emotions from that deeper, further back memory echo or ripple up to the current moment and impact your emotional state. This is a tough time of year for me, and this year's in some ways especially tough. My father died from a brain injury around 18 years ago now. Now his death was in November, but his birthday was June 16th, and Father's Day is always around that same time. And so for me, seeing Father's Day commercials and other advertisements about Father's Day and show your father how much you love him and all of these things kind of tug at me and put me in a kind of sad place because my father isn't around anymore. And I loved him very much, and I miss him very much. And he's gone. And I'm never going to be able to interact with him again. So I've done my best to recalibrate myself in that. My partner Alan and I have been together for approaching 10 years. And I've been together around that, and so I've embraced celebrating his father on Father's Day and spending time with his family and enjoying, seeing his dad with his grandchildren and things like that. But I still miss my dad, and so every year when Father's Day starts approaching and I'm seeing the ads, I have this tinge of sadness and pain for it, because in some ways losing my dad was the realization of some of my very deepest fears. I lost my grandparents on my mother's side at a pretty young age. They'd been a big part of my life. And my first experience of depression was around their deaths and the deaths of other significant people in my life. And so I have always had my deepest fear tends to be around loss, tends to be around death. Growing up, my mom and I are a little too much alike in personality, in attitude, and so she and I would sometimes set each other off a bit, and she also leaned on me in ways that were a little much, and none of it was intentional, but it still, was hurtful in some ways and stressful in others. And so my dad was the one who was totally calm, and whatever happened, he'd just be like, oh, okay, and take it and process it and help me think it through. where if something happened and I was upset, my mom would be so busy trying to get me to tell her what it was and why it was, when I didn't even necessarily have those answers or those words, that it would be really stressful for me. On top of that, my dad died just a few months after my FND diagnosis. And he had been my rock while trying to get diagnosed. He's the one who took me to doctor's appointments. He was the one who helped me get where I needed to go, was the calm presence in the doctor's office to help me, handle it and feel stronger, those kinds of things. And so with his death, I lost his support in a time when, in some ways, I needed it most. And then on top of that, when my dad died, my mom unintentionally wanted a lot more support from me than I was capable of giving, or at least that's how it felt. When she was processing my grandparents' deaths, she overshared with me a bit about some aspects, and when Dad died, she fell back into some of those patterns because she, didn't quite know what else to do. And so I felt that pressure, and that added to my stress and made everything that much harder. So there's a lot of pain for me with Father's Day. And so I still feel it all these years later. And it's not huge anymore. It's a little tug, usually. But, I'll have a couple of days, usually this time of year, where I'm in a bit of an emotional funk and I'm struggling in various things. A lot of years I distract myself because I'm also very involved in the LGBT community because I'm bi. And so I would go to the, however much of the Pride celebrations I could participate in. I participate in the march at the end of the month. I do all of these things to give me that belonging sense that I'm here, that I'm not alone. And this year with COVID, I'm not feeling, most of the events were canceled. And I don't feel safe trying to do so because I'm somebody who gets sick easily. So that feeling of aloneness has been greatly exaggerated. So I'm doing my best to manage my emotional state. Well, processing through all of this and living with, the loss of my dad, which again is not new, but that's one of those pains that never completely goes away. And with processing through the possible loss of community that I'm experiencing right now with the issues within By Request, I'm feeling very alone. And what I kind of put effort into reminding myself of is there are good reasons that I feel alone, and they make logical sense, but they're not my fault. My father died because he fell off a ladder. It was really bad luck. That's all it was. The timing of things is coincidental and unfortunate. I don't think there's ever a good time to lose your parents. So, I think it would have hit me hard no matter what. I just happened to be in a state where I couldn't process emotions, and, that made it that much harder. COVID-19 is, and well, there are many ways that our president could have handled it better, and ways in which it could have been managed or minimized, and maybe things wouldn't have been so bad. I didn't do anything to make this particularly worse or better. All I am doing and all I can do is take care of myself, which at this point means keeping myself safe by minimizing contact with other people who may have been exposed, which means minimizing contact with everybody, unfortunately. And so I'm processing through and doing my best to hang on and move forward. Emotional echoes are very, very real, and they can very strongly impact your feelings, both in a moment and in medium to long term. I just want all of the viewers, everybody, to the next time something happens and you have a really strong emotional reaction or a stronger emotional reaction than you would expect, look at it, examine it more deeply, and see what it might have been for you that triggered that deeper reaction. Because once you know why, you can reassure yourself on it. I know that I'm sad on Father's Day because I miss my dad. So I can say, you miss him because you loved him. And that's a good thing. And so while I'm sad, I don't get stuck in the sad. I can acknowledge it and let it pass through me and pull myself back out of that sadness and that funk to keep going. Where if I just was like, gee, I feel sad and I don't know why, that's a lot harder to solve or resolve. And sometimes there's a lot of trauma that we experience and sometimes not as much, but trauma is one of those things that can reach out years and years later and hit you and make things hurt a lot more. And so the better able you are to recognize those underlying contributions, the better you can manage those things so that it doesn't hurt as much the next time those feelings get triggered, so that you can get yourself back on stride sooner after those emotions get set off or after you feel that pain. And also by doing that, you can maybe prevent some new pain, because if you're feeling really hurt over something that a friend did and it's mainly because of the echoes, you can explain that to the friend and have that friendship grow stronger as a result, potentially. Where if all you know is you're hurt, you're very likely to lose or destroy that friendship or that relationship. And so it's really important to dig in and understand why you feel the way you do and what events in your life might be the reason for these echoes. So I just wanted to give you that to think about. I'm going to attach a post that I wrote a while ago that's actually also related to my father's death, but is about a more recent experience where my mother was so impacted by emotional echoes that I ended up being in a very emotionally uncomfortable and unsafe place, and I had to take time away from her. I'm very happy to report that us taking that time for her to readjust her expectations of me and for me to recover, we're fine now. Our relationship is as good as it's ever been. I feel very comfortable again. I'm in a safe space as far as she's concerned. And that's because I was able to identify what was going on and why and how and express it to her. And she was able to accept that and give me the space I needed. That's what I'm talking about it being important. Because that pain's real. The hurt is real. The upset is very, very real. But if you can identify the underlying cause, if you can identify the reason you're so impacted, it may not be primarily or only the other person. And it may be something that you can learn and grow from and be able to build a better next step instead of something that causes more pain and more loss. All right. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. And I want nothing but the best for you. So whatever else you're doing, keep thriving.